a couple of graduates have graduated today, and one of the key issues you've been speaking to and about was the issues of imperialism. To what extent do you feel that the media itself could be polarized or maybe could be used to drive the imperialistic agenda?
Thank you, members of the Fourth Estate. What we need to appreciate and understand is that the government of Zimbabwe values the importance of education. That the government of Zimbabwe, in terms of the National Development Strategy 1, also prioritized the importance of human capital development, which is very key. And that imperialism is not yet over. It's very factual, given the reality that we have redefined education in terms of heritage-based education, and in that as we journey towards an upper middle income society, importance and priority. That
there are no sanctions that have been targeted against any Zimbabweans, and they say that there are certain specific individuals under the Global Magnitsy program. What is your response to this position?
The fact and the reality that the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, His Excellency Dr. Idi Mnangagwa, has been sanctioned is a direct attack on the people of Zimbabwe, number one. Number two, it is a fact that the sanctions have been put in place. Yes, there have been changes of names, but that is a no-brainer. I've already indicated that the sanctions have been put in place to punish Zimbabwe for embarking on a self-determination route, to punish Zimbabwe for its right to self-determination. The sanctions are illogical and illegal. They've been condemned by the United Nations. They've been condemned by the African Union. They've been condemned by SADC and many other progressive nations. So it's a reality, it is a fact that sanctions have been put in place with an imperialist agenda to perpetuate hegemony, Western hegemony on African people. And the basis of the sanctions emanate from a bilateral dispute between Zimbabwe and Britain, given the reality that this is a historical matter related to the totalitarian disposition of Zimbabwe's economy to Western countries. And this is part of what journalists should focus on, the history. Before the white people had the title deeds, who owned the land? What came first? Did we have the title deeds first, or we already had the land? And who was dispossessed by these settlers? And what was the goal of these settlers? And what is still the goal of Western hegemony on African countries? The goal has always been to oppress, to suppress, to subjugate, to dispossess, to control, to colonize, and to have in their possession the Africans' thinking. So, as the new dispensation, we have clearly put in place the Education 5.0. We have depolarized the media, which is also part of an ongoing process. And that ongoing process should see us mentally decolonized as a people in Africa. Because the goal is not only to colonize and have in their possession Zimbabwean people's thinking, but the rest of the continent. Because it suits their Western hegemony interest to subjugate, to control African people's thinking, to punish them. So when you analyze some of the speeches that were given some few days by the new ambassador, that is undiplomatic, what the new US ambassador said. because the right to govern and lead in Zimbabwe is through the people of Zimbabwe. The people of Zimbabwe have the right to self-determination, to choose their leaders. And in this particular case, the people of Zimbabwe voted overwhelmingly for His Excellency the President Dr. E.D. Mnangagwa and ZANU-PF. So the aspersions that the new ambassador sought to cast about Zimbabwe's electoral systems is based on fiction and on an imperialist Western orientation that the Western countries have the responsibility and international electoral judiciary systems to preside over Zimbabweans.
She mentioned SADC and AU said they also had issues with our elections, amongst others, in a recent speech. How do you...
Tonio, let me finish. It is very important to highlight that we are not subjects who seek to be taught on how democracy works. As Zimbabweans and as African people, the right to govern ourselves is in terms of our constitution through the people of Zimbabwe. And historically, for us to be able to be democratic, the independence and democracy that we enjoy, the one man, one vote that we enjoy in our country, the democracy that we enjoy in our country, which has allowed every adult in our country to be able to vote, was not handed over on a silver platter by these imperialists. Where were they when sovereign a nation? But also, I want to appeal to the conscience of the US ambassador to reflect on the historical aspects related to the election processes that have taken place in the United States, which also includes the Al Gore President George W. Bush election, the controversy and chaos involved in the election processes between President Trump and President Biden in the last term, where for the first time we learned that Americans defined what they term domestic terrorism and vote rigging claims by many candidates. And that recently we've witnessed American presidential candidates being dragged to court, yet we have elections in 2024. And that assassination attempts on presidential candidates. So I believe our appeal to the conscience of the US ambassador will perhaps bring light to the reality and reflection that Zimbabwe's democracy is matured so fast that we are a sovereign nation, and that in Zimbabwe we do not drag candidates, presidential candidates and any candidates to court. And in Zimbabwe we do not assassinate or attempt to assassinate presidential candidates. We all know the history around many other candidates who have been assassinated in the American history. So our appeal is that Zimbabwe is a sovereign state that governs its electoral processes in the context of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, and that the right to govern and lead a country is derived from the people of Zimbabwe. So as a country, our engagement and engagement policy is very clear that we're a friend to all and an enemy to none, and that we look forward to working together with the United States on a number of cooperation and development projects as we journey towards an upper middle income society by the year 2030. And that we look forward to work together in terms of international relations and to contribute positively towards the economic and social development of our people on an equal basis. That it should come to an end that the undiplomatic Western orientation that African countries ought to be tutored about what democracy is. We fought for democracy. It was not handed over to us on a silver platter. But what the ambassador needs to know is to locate a country's contribution, negative or positive, towards Zimbabwe's liberation. I thank you.